This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome back to The Science of Magic, a program combining the science and magic of today's leading dilemmas to promote revolutionary thought and hopefully co-create new solutions. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring Zen to get sane. I once asked my old Lakota teacher why he spent so much time alone in nature rather than with people. His answer: you have to isolate yourself from what is not true in order to find that which is. He was an amazing medicine man and healer. He told me that only the true voice of nature can heal a person by reminding them of who they are. But first, we have to shut up long enough to hear it. He also described modern society as inside out and backwards, and for the most part, totally crazy. Not understanding much of what he said at the time, I've spent the many years since his death contemplating his teachings. Watching the progression, or should I say regression of society, I find I have to agree with him. Mostly we're staggering around in our madness. We unconsciously destroying everything in our path. A delusional race living in a distorted reality of our own making. The only way to see through the illusion is to stand apart, disengage, and align with life itself. How can we see past the collective delusion? Do the teachings of ancient traditions hold anything that can help us today? Why are the old teachings so enigmatic and hard to understand from our modern perspective? What can they tell us about how life really works? In order to further explore these mysteries, let's triangulate between the modern viewpoint, old teachings from a Lakota medicine man, and that of a Zen priest. With us this hour to hold up the Zen part of the equation is Brad Warner, the author of It Came from Beyond Zen, and numerous other titles, including Don't Be a Jerk, Sit Down and Shut Up, and Hardcore Zen. A Soto Zen priest, he's a punk bassist, filmmaker, Japanese monster movie marketer, and a popular blogger based in Los Angeles. His website is hardcorezen.info. Brad, thanks for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thank you for having me.
The name of your book, let's start there.
Yeah. Do you want me to explain it? I'll try.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
Well, as your intro mentioned, I worked in the Japanese monster movie business for many years, and I'm a big fan of just that kind of cheap, low-budget science fiction film stuff. So that's obviously an influence. But the other thing it refers to is that Dogen, who is this 13th century Japanese Zen Buddhist monk and writer who I enjoy very much, he wrote a piece called Inmo, which Inmo is just it's a Chinese word that he picked. He's Japanese, but he picked this Chinese word that just means kind of something or it. And he uses this word to refer to what I think a lot of mystical traditions would use the word God to refer to. It's kind of this sense that there is something which holds together this universe and can be said to be, in a sense, intelligent and conscious. The reason I find this essay so fascinating is that in the Zen tradition, it's often presented when you read the Wikipedia entry on Zen. Actually, I don't know what that one says, but these kind of really basic introductions to Zen will often say, well, Zen is a religion without God, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's true that there's no sort of creator God or this kind of mythological man in the sky character in the Zen tradition or in the Buddhist tradition in general. But there is this idea. It isn't a materialistic philosophy that says there's nothing out there. It says we're deeply connected with this thing, but this great something can't be named. And anyway, that's how I got to it. I translated, or I should say paraphrased, this essay in the book, and I gave it the title, It Came from Beyond Zen, because I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's too funny. It kind of reminds me of It Came from Beneath the Sink or from the swamp. Or,
yeah, that kind of a thing.
So we're all on the same page. Let's start out with exactly what is Zen.
Well, yeah, when people ask that, I usually default to a kind of historical answer, which may be sort of dry for people. People want Zen is the plum tree in the garden. But historically speaking, it's a movement within Buddhism that occurred about between 800 and 1,000 years after Buddha died. The movement that he started in India had spread out, but it had also become very religious. It had become it had grabbed onto a lot of other traditions that existed in the various areas that it went into, and people were doing a lot of ritual and a lot of other stuff that wasn't related to what the Buddha actually taught. He went around India basically teaching people to meditate. I mean, this is his main claim to fame. And by this time, a lot of Buddhists were not meditating at all. So the Zen tradition kind of came out of northern India and China, where a lot of people said, well, let's get back to the roots of this. Let's just meditate. Let's make meditation our main thing. And Zen is interesting in that it has to reinvent itself constantly in order to keep reminding people that no, that what we're really here to do is meditate. We're not here to do all this other stuff that kind of gets stuck on to the meditation practice.
So why are we here to meditate?
Well, I think meditation is something that is necessary for human beings. I say this kind of. You can't see me on the radio, but I say this with a little bit of a wry smile because I think people won't accept that. But I think we really need to spend a certain amount of time every day just in total quiet, kind of like what your introduction said. And you don't really even need to go out in the woods or anything to do it. You can do it in your own place, but you need a practice, I think, to kind of clear out your mind at least a little bit from all the clutter that's gotten stuck in there over the past 24 hours. And you do this, and I think we need it more urgently now than ever because we are rapidly increasing our technological abilities to the point where we all have access to tremendous amounts of power, and if we don't use that power responsibly, we could really mess things up. And I really believe that the meditation practice can help you uncover what you truly want. This is something my teacher used to say. When you do Zazen, which is the type of meditation we do, you find out what you truly want. And what you go ahead.
And why is that important?
Well, I think it's important because what you uncover is the interconnectedness of us all, and so you are less likely to follow the whims of your personal ego inclinations when you discover that what makes you happy and what makes the world a better place are actually exactly the same thing. And then it doesn't become, people think you have to make an effort to do good things, or to be a decent person, but you find that it becomes kind of effortless because it's what you actually want to do.
It seems to me, though, that we're taught to want things. We don't really know what we want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true, yeah.
It goes back to consumerism and subliminal messaging. And so are you seeing meditation as a way around that?
Yeah, because I think what happens is you have desire is this one very interesting topic within Buddhism, and it probably could go on for hours about it. But you have a natural desires or natural inclinations. But what consumerism and materialism and these kind of philosophies do is they take that and they tweak it into something that benefits somebody else financially, basically. And you're right, we are taught very early on to follow that. But the natural inclinations of what we are kind of moving towards or what we want to do at any given moment are actually for the benefit of this greater collective. I mean, I probably sound crazy saying this, but I found this to be true as I've kind of looked into myself over years and years of doing this.
Well, it seems like human beings are the only ones that don't play that way. I mean, if you watch wolf packs or flocks of birds, I've got these birds, I filled the feeder and it had been empty for a while. And as soon as I fill it, eventually one of the breed will come and find it. But he won't eat. He'll just sit there and squawk until all his friends come and drain the feeder. Yeah. I mean, we see that everywhere. Why not in people?
It's hard to say. I think we've gotten confused. I think one thing that probably, this is just speculation, I suppose, but I think early in human history, we discovered that the one thing we had going for us were these big brains. Like as wild animals out in the African savannah, we don't have a lot of advantages. We're food for lions and things, except that we're in a lot of ways more clever than those animals are. I mean, in some ways we're not, but we can kind of band together and do things. And I think this kind of focus on what the brain can do initially led to great success for the human animal, but now it's become kind of twisted into a strange direction. And Buddha noticed this 2,500 years ago, and he probably wasn't the first.
And it hasn't gotten any better since, right?
Well, this is an interesting question. I don't know. I think we're at a point of uneasy equilibrium. I do think things are getting worse and getting weirder in some ways, and in other ways we're managing. And I just say that based on the fact that we haven't blown ourselves up yet, And I think that's actually a really positive sign. It was when I first encountered the teacher who ordained me in Japan. I was really kind of negative and morose about the world, and he was a big optimist.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Brad Warner, the author of It Came from Beyond Zen. His website, hardcorezen.info. Brad, we were just getting into seeing the world differently. How can meditating or the Zen practice help us with that?
Well, the kind of meditation that we do in the form of Zen that I studied is called shikantaza, which is just a fancy Japanese way of saying just sitting. So the type of meditation that I teach and that I learned is goalless. So you're not trying to make anything happen. So even the goal of becoming a better person or changing the way you see reality or any of that just kind of goes out the window, and you just try to get into the pure experience of simply sitting. And you'd think, I think most people, maybe certainly even myself when I first heard of this, would think, well, what's going to happen then? It's no better than just kind of lounging on your couch watching TV or something. But it actually is very different, because you're dropping every attempt to get away from what you actually are doing, which happens to be sitting still and staring at a wall. That's how we do it. And by doing that, you start to encounter yourself in a very deep way, and eventually, this takes a while to get there, but eventually you start to see that what you thought of as yourself and what you thought of as everyone else and everything else, there isn't a barrier there. You kind of, if you're like me, you've gone your whole life thinking there was this insurmountable barrier between you and the rest of the world, and that there was this eternal separation. But by looking into it without trying to do anything, you kind of encounter the fact that this barrier doesn't exist, and this can change everything that you do, in any encounter that you have, anything that you do becomes different.
It sounds like you're letting go of the personal stories that compartmentalize your life.
Well, sure. I mean, you have to. I mean, the interesting thing that happens, or non-interesting thing, a friend of mine who does this practice, who's a priest, said it's sort of like chewing a piece of gum from which all the flavor is gone. That's the kind of feeling you get about your personal story when you're sitting zazen, because at first your experience, most people's experience, is just kind of that personal story asserting itself and kind of making a lot of noise. But after a while, you realize it's only got like 15 things to say, and it just keeps going over and over on those. And you go, well, why am I listening to this? Even though I've spent my whole life being really, really concerned about this personal self, you realize it's sort of boring and it doesn't really matter that much. And that I found personally really freeing.
How much of it is our concept of our personal self from our damage and conditioning?
Oh, I think almost all of it. It's that. I mean, they do in some forms of this practice call it the conditioned self. That's how they refer to it, and it is just your conditioning. It's just all of that stuff that's happened to you as an individual being. Because we don't deny that you as an individual being, me as an individual being exists, because that would be silly. But the question is, what is that, and how does it connect with everything else? And it seems to me that what it is a facet of a much larger project. I've tended to use this strange word project when I talk about this, because I kind of feel that's a one way of looking at it. That maybe the universe is manifesting itself in this particular way as us for a reason, and that reason will probably always be obscure to us as individuals, but I don't think that means it doesn't exist. I just think it means that the individual isn't capable of fully comprehending where this is all going, but it is capable of accepting that it is going somewhere, and that it might be good to kind of go along with where it's going rather than try to fight against it.
It would appear to me that this practice might be difficult for people that are extremely compartmentalized due to damage, because running into yourself may or may not be a cheery thing at that point. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it really. I think this goes for anybody who does it. There's a certain in Christian meditation, they have this idea of the dark night of the soul, and there's somebody. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember the name, but there's somebody I talked to who is investigating mindfulness practice and has this thing called the Dark Night Project, in which she is kind of looking at how people who do meditation practice will run into this. And one of the downsides that she's seen of the current mindfulness movement is that there's no methodology or no tradition in there to deal with it. Whereas the Zen tradition, which is much older, does have that. So everybody's going to encounter really ugly parts of themselves. Now, depending on how deep that goes, yeah, the practice could be anything from being incredibly uncomfortable to being positively terrifying. I've had moments of real terror in Zen practice. However, if you engage in it properly, there are ways to deal with it. So, it depends on the person. I've had people come to me who I've said, well, maybe you should talk to somebody else. But in general, we do have ways of dealing with a lot of the deeper things, because everybody's got it. We've all got it. I mean, some arguably have it worse than others, but we do all have it. So,
would you mind describing some of those methodologies to deal with the ugliness when it comes up?
Yeah, it's not really a sort of standard set of things. It's just, for example, in order to be ordained as in the traditional style of a Zen priest, and I don't even like the word priest, but we leave that aside for a minute, you have to demonstrate to your teacher that you have undergone that process yourself. And it's not usually so much stated like, demonstrate to me that you've gone through the dark night of the soul. It's not something your teacher is likely to say, but your teacher will see that because she or he has already been through that themselves. So they understand this, and so basically what I do is if somebody comes to me with that, I try to relate it to the darkness I've faced, because I really believe there's a great commonality between human experience. We focus on the differences between individual experiences, and that's okay. But what you find, I think, when you look at it more carefully is that these experiences are all kind of there's a common theme running through all of them. And it's usually has to do with this kind of sense of the individual self asserting itself against the greater whole. And the examples range from all over the map, but it all kind of comes down to that. And so you just kind of deal with it by talking. There's a tradition called Dokusan, which is just a private consultation we do. And every time I run a retreat, I give everybody an opportunity to do this, and we just sit in a little room together and talk. But what I'm trying to do as this kind of facilitator of it is get out of the way and find the place where the two of us in the room are meeting in a common ground, where we can kind of stand there and look at what surrounds us both and see what that is. I guess
so
that
that differs from therapy, because you mentioned that sometimes somebody will come to you and you go, yeah, maybe you need to be talking to somebody else. Do you refer out?
Well, not specifically. I mean, I don't have like a group of therapists or anybody that are on call that I would deal with. But, occasionally, on a rare occasion, somebody seems to be having a difficulty that's kind of beyond what I can deal with. And what it usually seems to me is it's not the difficulty itself. It's the way the person has learned to process it is the problem usually, because you can kind of bounce back from almost anything if you geez, this sounds crazy, but if you kind of approach it the right way. But yeah, I have told people, don't stop taking your meds and keep seeing your therapist.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people think they want to find and kill their shadow. Would you speak to that?
Yeah, I don't think that's the way to do it. I think the shadow is something we all have, and it isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's the other side of the coin. And if you try to root it out and destroy it, you may be destroying your own ability to get better. It always makes me think of this Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk, gets the one where he gets split into his good half and his bad half, and he finds his good half is very amiable and works well with others, but he can't do anything. He's powerless. And I think whoever wrote that episode was very insightful and understood this basic thing that shadow part of ourselves is actually a way into something better if you let it be. But if you keep pushing it away, it actually lends power to it, and it makes it more evil than it actually is.
How much do you think of viewing our shadow as evil has to do with guilt and shame rather than fact?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with it. Shame is a kind of an interesting thing, and guilt, because a little bit of it is helpful, and I think that's kind of obvious. You do something, you feel guilty about it, you go, I better not do that thing again because that was bad, and I think that's about all you need. But I think what usually happens, or what very often happens, is that guilt becomes part of what we think we are. And we don't want to lose our guilt and our shame because we're afraid that if we let go of it, we'll stop being who we are. But what I've found in the practice that I do is that if you let go of it, you're still exactly who you are. There's nothing gone, and you still have the capacity to go, I better not do that again. But you're not so kind of neurotic about it and feeling that you must constantly remind yourself of the bad thing that you did. It's not necessary. After a while, you just the fact.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. We're speaking with Brad Warner, the author of It Came from Beyond Zen. His website, hardcorezen.info. Brad, we were going to talk about the little self, the big self, and ego.
Yeah, this is a huge thing, and one of the kind of key questions that we ask ourselves in Zen is, who am I? So we all have an experience of reality. I'm sitting in an apartment in Los Angeles talking to you, and you're up there in Ontario, and it's warmer here probably, and so we have a slightly different experience, and so we extrapolate from that and say that I have a self and you have a self. But the question that comes up is whether there is a self which includes both you and I and all of the listeners and everybody else. And collectively, I think, I don't know, the current thinking that I see going on in Western society is that, no, that's not right. Everybody's an individual and we're all eternally separate. And we've kind of hoed that row for a few hundred years in Western society. But I think it's starting to break down as people come together more, and we realize that these separations we feel are kind of an illusion, even though it's a very, very strong illusion. We really feel it's there. But you're kind of embracing two sides of a coin. One side is, obviously there are, for example, two different people having this conversation together, and we can say that. But there's also a collective in which that dissolves and breaks down, and there aren't two people. There's just this one thing having one gigantic experience, and both sides, I think, are important to keep juggling.
This brings me to an interesting topic. Okay, My teacher, who was a Lakota elder and shaman, he spent most of his time alone in nature. And Dogen, is that the way you say his name?
Dogen,
thank you.
Yeah.
Dogen was, for the most part, in a monastery.
Yeah.
So how can the teachings of these masters that are so isolated apply to modern life?
It's an interesting question, because when I look at Dogen, I see that he had to separate himself from general society to get deeper into himself, and it was necessary. And if you look at the time and place that he lived, you can see that it was very violent. Japan in the 1200s was probably worse than any third world nation you can think of today in terms of just constant violence and constant warfare and political disruption and so forth. And we do live in a somewhat different world. I mean, for all the whole weird things that are going on politically and socially, it is a bit more stable now, and we can find spaces to devote ourselves to a practice within society. But it's difficult. It requires a kind of a balancing act. And I think it's still true that if you really, really want to go deeply into this stuff, that if that's what you mainly are concerned with in life, you are going to have to go off alone, at least for a while. The Zen tradition has a kind of a way to do that, which I think makes it interesting. I think what the Buddha's great innovation wasn't so much to come up with meditation. Other people have meditated before, but he came up with a way to do it as a group activity, which I think the society in his time and the society in our time need, and which just means you get a number of people together and they pick a spot and they meditate together and they agree not to get in each other's way during this very sort of personal, raw individual practice that they're all doing. And it's a difficult sort of thing to kind of make it work, which is why in Zen temples there are really strict rules, and there's a kind of a hierarchy even of people. But the hierarchy isn't something you believe in as an eternal thing. You just accept it as part of making this group meditation stuff work. So I think there are different ways to approach it.
Well, it seems that there's a paradox here.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, yeah, there always is, darn it. On one hand, we're trying to unify with all that is, and we're having to isolate to do so.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because the unification with all that is our background. It's always there. So it's not that you go off into the woods or into the monastery to make that happen. You do it in order to kind of get away from some of the noise and things that interrupts your ability to see that. It's like silent. This might sound like Zen paradox. Silence is always there, even in the midst of tremendous noise, but it's harder to focus on silence during, in the midst of tremendous noise. I mean, and that's the simple reason for that is you're an animal, you're a social animal, and you are attuned to hearing what other members of your species are doing, and that's part of how you stay safe and stay alive. So it's very natural if you're in a noisy place to attend to the noise that's going around, which is why sometimes you have to find a very quiet place so that you don't need to focus so much of your attention on all that external noise.
So is group meditation like a training so that you can do both?
I think so, yeah. And I think the group meditation is a really interesting thing because you think about the primitive society that the Buddha was dealing with, by our standards would seem primitive, and just having a bunch of people around helps you to make things happen. But also it's the training is that you learn, you find this space, this silent space, and you realize that this silent space isn't something that happens out there in the woods or something. That's a good place to find it, or on the top of a mountain or whatever. But you realize that it's going on all the time, and that you can find it any time that you need it. That's the great benefit, and that's what you're actually training for.
Is to come back to who you are originally.
Yeah, who you are originally and how you're connected to this great intelligent silence or something.
So is there a degree of enlightenment that comes from that? Do we get information from those spaces?
That's an interesting question, because in Buddhism you have this story that goes right back to the beginnings where Buddha sat under a tree and experienced enlightenment, and people kind of imagine that as some kind of barrier that one crosses. And after which everything becomes different, and that is true. That does happen. But the enlightenment that you discover through this process isn't something newly created. It's something that was always there. So that's the tricky bit. And I think this is where a lot of people go wrong, because they're looking for, and I'm one of these people, I should say before I even say this, we're looking for something outside of our ordinary experience, because we think our ordinary experience is somehow mundane or unworthy or just kind of small and silly, and that there's some greater thing going on beyond it. But what's really going on is that our so-called mundane and ordinary life is the enlightenment that we're seeking, and that's part of what Zen keeps, what all the great Zen teachers keep saying, and it's so really difficult.
So it kind of goes back to chop wood, carry water, but be present with whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that's it. And the chopping wood, carry water, just to dovetail it around to my own work, is I think that's a great image. But on the other hand, how much of us chopping wood and carrying water is not our everyday experience anymore in modern Western society. So I think one of the things that gets kind of lost when you're trying to talk about Zen is people get very into the great, Asianness or Orientalness of the thing, and it's way over there. But, chopping wood and carrying water is the same as doing the dishes and making mac and cheese or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. Whatever's ordinary for you, yeah.
Right. But being present with whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the greatest Western misconception of Zen?
Oh, boy. I mean, there are so many.
There's a few.
Yeah, it's that it's this kind of chill out thing. I mean, I've been kind of, over the past couple of years, collecting examples of weird uses of Zen. There's in West Hollywood, there's a medical marijuana dispensary that's the Zen. It's called Zen Collective or something, and they have billboards, with this giant green Buddha, and just going, well, that's not exactly what we're getting at in this practice. It's not quite the same thing. So it's a serious practice, and I actually don't mind when people make fun of it, and I laugh at things like the Zen medical marijuana dispensary and the Zen nail salon and all the rest of it that you see around town. And I think it's okay to make, to have a good time with it, but it's also a very serious practice that does take some work, and it's not just kind of chilling out,
What do you think is the most beneficial aspect for modern people of the Zen practice?
Well, I think it's just coming into contact with who you really are, because you probably, if you're like me, think you know who you are, but working in this practice, you find that what you thought you were is very superficial. It's like this kind of glaze on top that doesn't get to the real heart of who you are. And when you find that the heart of who you are and the heart of who everyone else isn't really different, and that even your worst enemies or whatever example you can think of as the worst person in the world, you have a common ground with that person. And I really believe, my optimistic side believes that if we can kind of work on that, we might be able to get through this evolution and human thing into something that's our actual birthright, which I think is much better than what we have now.
So that's another interesting topic that we're probably going to have to pick up on the other side of a break. But let's get started. Evolution. Why are we evolving now?
I don't know. I think something is happening, and I really kind of try to stay away from the kind of fluffy parts of...
The Earth is under ever-increasing pressure from untenable lifestyles and growing populations. Yet, viable answers seem in short supply. What if I told you there's an ancient form that can empower you to take charge of your life? What if your entire family could be enfolded and supported by life itself, finding safe passage through challenging times? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with great news: an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes based in an ancient form of shamanism, easily learned and used by your entire family. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow are a series of online adult and children's lessons instructing your entire family on natural law, how to cooperate with and be supported by the powers of the universe. Visit findyourpathhome.com to find these unique and powerful classes.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back, my friends. This is the Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. What's up in your world? I always love to hear from my listeners. So please email me at info@thescienceofmagic.net and suggest a topic or a guest that's on your mind. You're probably not the only one that would enjoy them. Our special guest this hour, speaking as people of service to the world, is Brad Warner, the author of It Came from Beyond Zen. His website, hardcorezen.info. Brad, we were just starting talk about evolution. Mm-hmm. Was the conversation devolving, or are we okay here?
No, I think it's an interesting question because you can look at evolution in science and you can say something is happening, and I think as human beings we are moving towards something, and what evolution's end goal is anybody's guess. We used to think it was the perfection known as the human body or something like that, but I think that's kind of gone by the wayside, that idea. But we are kind of moving towards something, and I feel very positive about it and very negative. Like I said earlier, I had this very dour negative side until I encountered the teacher who ordained me in Japan, who was very positive and upbeat, even when you think about some of the horrific things he had to encounter in his life, he managed to get through it. And I really think we are. I think we need. I think we need to be not too rosy about it because, like I said, it's like this kind of little bud that's kind of popping out of the ground that does need some protection and nurturing if it's going to actually happen. And that there are a lot of forces arrayed against it, but those forces arrayed against it are not external to ourselves. I think that's one of the things we have to acknowledge, because a lot of people sort of identify like the bad guys out there, and we all know who they are in our own lives, and think that the problem is there, but fail to acknowledge how we contribute to that. And I think that's the important thing, is to kind of understand that we ourselves can also do great damage to this if we're not careful about it.
Which brings us to another interesting point, compassion, which seems to be very prevalent in both Zen and shamanic practices. What can you tell us about compassion Zen style?
Yeah, Dogen has this weird phrase that he uses. He wrote this essay called Canon, and Canon is the bodhisattva of compassion. It's sort of the embodiment of compassion. And it's not looked upon usually as something external. It's something that we possess. But he says that compassion is like a hand reaching for a pillow in the night, which I think is when I first encountered it, I was like, what the heck does that mean? That doesn't make any sense. But he's using this as a metaphor of something that happens spontaneously. The hand reaching for the pillow is implying that we're asleep when it happens. So we're not even trying to do something. We're just responding to the situation that exists. And so in that way, our compassion arises spontaneously according to the situation, and we don't really have to work at it. The only thing we have to work at is getting out of the way of compassion, is kind of allowing compassion to happen. When you feel the impulse to be compassionate, not to stamp it out and say, "Oh, I got better things to do." You respond to it, and by responding to it, you actually make your life a little bit better. That's the interesting thing about it, is that compassionate action is never one-sided. It's never just something nice you do for somebody else. It's actually something nice you do for yourself, to be compassionate.
It seems our modern society often mistakes sympathy for compassion. Would you speak to that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, well, you just kind of, I mean, it's very easy on social media to think that you go, I feel for you, and you've done your bit for compassion for the day, and that's not really it. You have to kind of actually go and do something, but it's again, it's the spontaneous doing. It's not really, most of the time, if you try to be compassionate, the tendency will be to go wrong with it. So yeah, it's a tricky question.
It seems like compassion is more of a a being than a doing. Would you clarify that, please?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you find the compassionate place within yourself and allow that to manifest as it will, without making anything happen, without saying what would a compassionate person do in this situation. I mean, a little of that can help, if you're really having trouble. But most of the time, my teacher used to say this weird thing, which is the right answer is always apparent. And I would go, really? Because sometimes it seems to me like it's not. But working with the practice, I found that I think he's right. I think the right way to act in any situation is always apparent and is always available. It's just that we're very quick to make a lot of noise inside our heads and find ourselves doubting what we know to be true at some level.
So it would occur to me that it'd be pretty difficult to find the compassionate part that exists within yourself if you're compartmentalized in all your own stories and polarization. How do we find that place?
Yeah, well, the only thing I've found that's worked is this practice of just, when you're doing Zazen practice, you're just kind of left alone with yourself and the wall that you're staring at, and things come up. And if you attend to whatever your mind brings up, you can drive yourself nutty. And you realize that you don't need to attend to it, so you just let it go. So each time your personal self, kind of insists on being heard, rather than pushing it away, you just kind of let it happen and watch what happens when that occurs. And usually it's nothing. It's just like, I hate this right now, but you can just let it go. You just let that go. And enough of that, you habit. And then when you are encountering situations in the world, you already know how to let go of that stuff and get to what you really need to attend to, which may be something quite different.
Which brings us to what's the difference between true compassion and agenda?
Yeah, well, it's hard. I think true compassion is what you initially respond to, and in it, this is where I kind of break ranks with some Buddhist organizations who seem to think that compassion as an agenda is a good thing, and I think that can so easily go wrong that you're best to kind of avoid it entirely and just not even try to be compassionate. I know that might sound terrible to some people, but if you allow spontaneous compassion to arise, it doesn't become an agenda. Even often you can mask a personal agenda with the idea that you're being compassionate, but what you really want is the
absolutely
kind of reward.
Right.
The likes that you're going to get on social media,
There's always that, right?
Yeah.
We have a few minutes left here. I'd like to shift gears. You speak of the dream within the dream. What is that?
Oh God, that's one of Dogen's most difficult pieces, and that's why I left it to the end of the book. But he has this interesting idea that on one level, our waking life can be seen as a kind of dream. Now, we understand there's a difference between that and the dreams that we have when we go to bed at night. But on the other hand, we're putting together a picture of the world we exist in that may not be fully true. And one of the ways to deal with that is to first accept, just intellectually, that what you think is going on might not be what's going on. And accepting that intellectually kind of opens a door to accepting it experientially. So you just kind of experience the world in its purest form, and then it shows the dreamy quality of the ideas you had about things start to show themselves or show itself for what it is, that you're actually kind of putting together a scenario that might not be true. Like I said, it's one of Dogen's most difficult essays. And
so we're creating the dream that's in the dream.
Yeah, because he talks about explaining a dream within a dream is the original title of the essay, something like that. And yeah, he's saying that even the writing that he is doing in this writing that you're reading when you read this essay is a process of explaining a dream to a dream, and thereby allowing the possibility of going beyond just the dream into something more actually real.
You know, this is a fascinating subject. Unfortunately, it's at the end of our episode. But every tradition deals with life as a dream in one form or another. It just fascinates me. So I guess for people to find out more about Dogen and his